My daughter forgot to hang up the phone. I heard, "It's time for him to go to a nursing home. He's a burden." I didn't say anything, but at that moment, something in me broke. I sold the house for $890,000. They came back from a business trip, smiling, but there was a surprise waiting for them. The keys did not fit the door. They found a note on the doorstep, and after reading it, they started screaming. And then I realized they wouldn't just leave it alone. This was just the beginning. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The phone rang just as I was scraping the last of the meatloaf from my plate. Ellen's meatloaf recipe, though mine never tasted quite right without her touch. I glanced at the caller ID and smiled despite myself. Caitlin. "Dad, how are you holding up?" Her voice carried that familiar warmth that always made my chest tighten with love and loneliness. I settled into Ellen's old recliner, the leather worn smooth from years of her evening reading sessions. "Oh, you know me, sweetheart. Just finished dinner and was about to watch the news." I didn't mention it was leftovers from 3 days ago, or that I'd been staring at Ellen's photo on the mantel for the better part of an hour. "Are you eating enough? You know you can always order groceries online now, right? I showed you the app." "I'm eating plenty," I interrupted gently, "though I had a little scare yesterday. Forgot to turn off the burner under my coffee pot. Good thing I smelled it burning from the living room." There was a pause. I could picture her frowning in that way she'd inherited from her mother, the same little crease between her eyebrows. "Dad, maybe we should talk about getting someone to check on you more regularly. Jeremy thinks—" "I'm fine, Caitlin. Really? How's your business trip going? You're in Phoenix, right?" "Yes, the conference ends tomorrow. Jeremy's been handling most of the client meetings while I sit through these endless presentations about digital marketing trends." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "Listen, Dad, I should probably get going. Jeremy and I have dinner plans with some potential investors." "Of course, sweetheart. I love you." "Love you too, Dad. Take care of yourself, okay?" I heard a click, then rustling sounds. She must have dropped the phone in her purse, I thought, reaching to hang up my end. But then I heard voices, muffled but clear enough through her phone's microphone. "Jeremy, you see how he's deteriorating?" Caitlin's voice, no longer warm and caring. "He forgot to turn off the stove yesterday. What if he burns the house down?" My hand froze on the receiver. Ice spread through my chest. "It's time for a nursing home, Caitlin." Jeremy's voice cold and matter-of-fact. "He's becoming a burden, and you know it. Your dad's a good man, but he can't live alone anymore." "The house is worth almost $1 million now." Caitlin's tone had shifted to pure calculation. "With Denver's market, we could probably get 900,000, maybe more." "Exactly." Jeremy sounded pleased. "We could sell it, put him somewhere decent, not too expensive, and finally buy that house in Boulder we've been looking at, the one with the mountain view." My daughter laughed, actually laughed. "God, Jeremy, you should have seen him tonight. So grateful just to hear from me. He has no idea we're planning this. The longer we wait, the more confused he'll get. We should strike while he still trusts us completely." The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto the hardwood floor Ellen and I had installed together 23 years ago. Every board laid by my own hands, every nail driven with thoughts of our family's future. I sat in the sudden silence of my empty house, staring at Ellen's photograph. Her eyes seemed to bore into mine with an expression I couldn't quite read. Disappointment? Warning? Or maybe just the terrible knowledge that comes to those who've already left this world. The grandfather clock in the hallway, Ellen's anniversary gift to me 15 years ago, ticked steadily in the growing darkness. Outside, the first spring crickets began their evening song in the garden Ellen had planted, and I still tended. Something cold and hard settled in my chest, replacing the warmth I'd felt hearing my daughter's voice just moments before. My hands, weathered from decades of construction work, slowly curled into fists. They thought I was a burden. They thought I was confused, helpless, ready to be managed and discarded. They were already spending my money, already planning their new life in my grave. But I wasn't dead yet, and I wasn't nearly as confused as they believed. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark, Ellen's face watching me from the silver frame on the end table. The house felt different now, as if the walls themselves had heard my daughter's betrayal and were holding their breath. My legs felt unsteady when I finally stood to turn on the lamp. The warm light fell across the living room we'd furnished piece by piece, each item chosen with care and saved for with sacrifice. The burgundy sofa where Caitlin used to curl up doing homework, the coffee table I'd built in the garage, sanding it smooth while she played at my feet. I walked to the kitchen and opened the drawer where I kept old receipts and papers. My fingers found the folder I was looking for without conscious thought. 20 years of financial records I'd never thrown away because Ellen always said, "You never know when you might need them." University of Colorado. Tuition receipts. $48,000 over 4 years. I remembered those double shifts, coming home with concrete dust in my hair and plaster under my fingernails. Ellen would have coffee waiting and would massage my shoulders while I paid bills at this very kitchen table. "Roy, you're working yourself to death," she'd said one night, watching me calculate how to afford Caitlin's spring semester. "She deserves better than we had, Ellen. She's smart enough for anything." Ellen had kissed the top of my head. "Just don't give her so much that she forgets to be grateful." I should have listened. God, I should have listened. The wedding receipts were in there too. $32,000 for one day. I'd told Caitlin we could afford 5,000, maybe 8 if we stretched. But she'd cried, actually cried, about wanting her dream wedding. I'd worked weekends for 6 months, installing hardwood floors for a contractor friend who paid me under the table. "Daddy, you're the best father in the world," she'd whispered during our dance, her head on my shoulder, her wedding dress rustling against my rented tuxedo. I'll never forget this. But she had forgotten. Just like she'd forgotten who co-signed her first car loan when her credit wasn't good enough. Just like she'd forgotten who made the calls to get her that marketing job when she was unemployed for 8 months after graduation. I found the bank statements from 2 years ago, after Jeremy lost his financial advisor position for reasons they never fully explained. They'd moved in temporarily, just until Jeremy found something new. I'd never charged them rent. I'd paid the increased utility bills, bought groceries for 3 adults instead of one lonely widower. Jeremy would pat my shoulder and call me the most generous man in Colorado. Caitlin would hug me and say, "Dad, we'll pay you back when we get on our feet." They'd been on their feet for over a year now, both working good jobs, both making more money than I ever had. But they'd never mentioned moving out, never mentioned paying me back. The anniversary dinner I'd paid for last month, $200 at that fancy steakhouse downtown, because Jeremy said they deserved to celebrate. The car repair bill I'd covered when Jeremy's BMW needed a new transmission, $3,000 that cleaned out my emergency fund. "Roy's like a father to me," Jeremy had told his friends at their last barbecue, his arm around my shoulders. "I'm so lucky to have married into this family." I'd been proud, actually proud to be the generous father-in-law, the man who took care of his family, no matter what it cost him. I walked upstairs to Ellen's and my bedroom, still unchanged after 2 years. Her jewelry box sat on the dresser, her reading glasses folded beside the lamp. I opened the bottom drawer where I kept our important papers and pulled out our original house deed. Roy and Ellen Hayes. Purchased 1999. No liens, no co-signers, no complications. My name only, now that Ellen was gone. Standing there in the bedroom where Ellen had spent her last days, surrounded by everything we'd built together, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp as broken glass, but underneath it something harder was forming. They wanted to put me away and sell my life's work. They thought I was too old, too confused, too grateful for their attention to fight back. I looked at Ellen's photo on the nightstand, remembering her voice from all those years ago. "Don't give her so much that she forgets to be grateful." Well, Ellen, our daughter had definitely forgotten, but she was about to remember that her old man wasn't as helpless as she thought. I walked to my home office and pulled out the business card I'd kept in my desk drawer for 3 years. Todd Fisher, real estate attorney. Ellen had insisted we meet with him after her cancer diagnosis, just to make sure our affairs were in order. It was time for another consultation. The next morning I walked through my house like a stranger seeing it for the first time. But instead of seeing home, I was seeing what Caitlin and Jeremy saw: square footage, market value, liquid assets. In the kitchen, I ran my hand along the granite countertop I'd installed myself, working by lamplight after my regular job, because we couldn't afford to hire contractors. Ellen had picked out the pattern, speckled gray with veins of gold that caught the morning light. She'd made coffee on this counter every morning for 16 years, until the cancer took her strength away. I remembered the Christmas morning when 3-year-old Caitlin took her first wobbly steps right here, from the refrigerator to Ellen's outstretched arms. We'd both cried with joy, Ellen scooping our daughter up and spinning her around while I scrambled for the camera. "Our baby's walking in our house," Ellen had whispered, tears streaming down her face, "in the house we built for her." The living room held 25 years of Christmas mornings. I could still see 7-year-old Caitlin's face lighting up at the sight of the dollhouse I'd spent 3 months building in the garage, working in secret after she'd gone to bed. Ellen had sewn tiny curtains for the windows, made miniature furniture from cardboard and fabric scraps. "Daddy, it's just like our house," Caitlin had squealed. And it was. I'd made it a perfect replica, down to the little bay window in what represented her bedroom. That bay window had cost me 6 months of overtime. Ellen had seen it in a magazine and fallen in love with the idea of reading there in the afternoons. I'd learned to cut angles I'd never cut before, measured and remeasured until my back ached from crawling around the frame. "Roy, we can't afford this," Ellen had worried when she saw me marking measurements on the wall. "You want it, you'll have it," I'd told her. "I'll make it work." I climbed the stairs to Caitlin's old room, still painted the soft yellow she'd chosen for her 16th birthday, still decorated with photos of her high school friends and college memories. The room where I'd rocked her through colicky nights as a baby, where Ellen and I had helped her with algebra homework at the small white desk I'd built to fit perfectly under the window. The master bedroom was the hardest. Ellen's side of the bed still had her water glass on the nightstand, her bookmark still marking page 247 of the novel she'd never finish. I'd built these walk-in closets with my own hands, custom designed to fit Ellen's height perfectly. Her clothes still hung there, still smelling faintly of her perfume. This was the room where we'd planned our future, where we'd whispered about our dreams for Caitlin, where Ellen had died holding my hand while machines beeped around us. "Promise me you won't let them take advantage of you," she'd said near the end, her voice barely a whisper. "You're too good, Roy. Too generous. Promise me you'll take care of yourself." I'd promised, but I hadn't kept that promise, had I? In my home office, I found the folder of construction photos Ellen had kept. Pictures of me laying the foundation in the spring of 1999, 25 years younger and 50 pounds stronger. Me and my crew installing the frame, Ellen in her hard hat bringing us lemonade on hot summer days, her belly just starting to show with Caitlin. The financial records from those years told the story Ellen's photos couldn't. Second mortgage. Personal loan from my brother. Ellen taking a part-time job at the school district to help with materials costs. We'd eaten beans and rice for months, drove cars held together with prayer and duct tape. But we'd built this house with our sweat, our sacrifice, our love for each other, and for the family we were creating. And now my daughter, the baby who'd taken her first steps in this kitchen, the child who'd played in the yard I'd landscaped by hand, wanted to sell it all and put me away like an inconvenient piece of furniture. I picked up Todd Fisher's business card from my desk drawer. The edges were worn from 3 years of handling, but the phone number was still clear. Caitlin and Jeremy thought they were dealing with a confused old man who'd be grateful for any scrap of attention they threw him. They thought I was weak, helpless, ready to hand over my life's work without a fight. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. I dialed Todd's number and listened to it ring, my hand steady as stone. Outside, the spring morning was bright and clear, the kind of day Ellen used to love, the kind of day for new beginnings. The law offices of Fisher and Associates occupied the second floor of a modest brick building on Colfax Avenue, the kind of place that specialized in helping regular people with real problems rather than impressing corporate clients. I'd chosen my best suit, the charcoal gray one Ellen had picked out for me to wear to her funeral, and arrived 15 minutes early, my hands only slightly trembling as I signed in at the reception desk. Todd Fisher was younger than I'd expected, maybe 55, with graying temples and the patient demeanor of a man who'd heard every family horror story twice. His office was lined with law books and family photos, a wife, 2 teenagers, a golden retriever. The kind of normal life Ellen and I had tried to build. Mr. Hayes, good to see you again. Todd poured coffee from a small machine in the corner, the rich smell filling the space between legal documents and filing cabinets. I remember you and Ellen from a few years back. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. I accepted the coffee, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I need to discuss something delicate about my daughter and son-in-law. Todd settled behind his desk, pen ready. I'm listening. I told him everything. The phone call, the overheard conversation, their plans to sell my house and put me in a nursing home. Todd's expression never changed, but I caught him shaking his head slightly when I described their eagerness to spend my money on their Boulder dream house. Unfortunately, Mr. Hayes, this scenario is more common than you'd think. Todd set down his pen and leaned back in his chair. Adult children often assume they know what's best for their aging parents, especially when valuable assets are involved. But they can't actually do anything, can they? I mean, legally. Let's start with the basics. The house is titled in your name only since your wife's passing, correct? That's right. Ellen and I owned it jointly, but when she died, it transferred to me automatically. Then legally speaking, your daughter and son-in-law have absolutely no claim to your property. They cannot sell it, cannot force you into a care facility, cannot make any decisions about your assets without your explicit consent. Todd pulled a legal pad from his drawer and began making notes. The house belongs to you, period. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by something sharper. So if I wanted to sell it myself, you could put it on the market tomorrow if you chose to. It's your property, your decision. Todd looked up from his notes. May I ask why you're considering that option? I thought about Caitlin's laugh when she'd called me a burden, about Jeremy's cold calculation of my worth, about 25 years of sacrifice reduced to a real estate transaction. They think I'm helpless, confused. They think they can manage me like a piece of property. My hands clenched around the coffee cup. Maybe it's time I showed them exactly how sharp my mind really is. Todd was quiet for a moment, studying my face. Denver's housing market is incredibly strong right now, especially in your neighborhood. Properties are selling within days, often for cash offers above asking price. He paused. If you were serious about selling quickly, before your daughter and son-in-law return from their trip, how quickly could it happen? With the right buyer, and there are plenty of investors looking for properties like yours, we could have a sale completed within a week, maybe less. Todd leaned forward. But Mr. Hayes, this is a major decision. Once you sell, there's no going back. I built that house with my own hands, Mr. Fisher. Every board, every nail, every custom detail. I know exactly what I'm doing. We spent the next hour discussing practicalities, market value estimates, cash buyer networks, legal requirements. Todd explained that he could have everything prepared within 24 hours if I was serious about proceeding. The consultation fee is $200, Todd said as I prepared to leave. If you decide to move forward, that applies toward my legal fees for the sale. I paid in cash, feeling more clear-headed than I had in months. Walking to my truck in the spring sunshine, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. Caitlin's name appeared on the screen, and for the first time since her betrayal, I smiled. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I could picture her in some hotel lobby in Phoenix, probably checking her watch, wondering why her grateful old father wasn't jumping to answer her call. Let her wonder. Let her and Jeremy make their plans about my future, my house, my life. They were in for the surprise of their lives. The phone kept ringing as I climbed into my truck, Todd Fisher's business card secure in my wallet, and a plan forming in my mind that would teach my ungrateful daughter exactly who she was dealing with. I had built my life from nothing once before. I could certainly tear it down and rebuild it on my own terms. The phone finally stopped ringing, but I knew she'd call back. She always did when she needed something from the old man. This time she was going to get much more than she bargained for. By the time I reached my driveway, confidence had replaced the tremor in my hands. Todd Fisher's words echoed in my mind. It's your property, your decision. 25 years of doubt and second-guessing had lifted like Denver fog in the morning sun. I was unlocking my front door when the phone rang again. Through the window, I could see it buzzing against the kitchen counter where I'd left it. Caitlin's name glowed on the screen, and for the first time since her betrayal, I smiled. Let her stew for a moment. Let her wonder why her grateful old father wasn't scrambling to answer. I poured myself a glass of water, took a deep breath, and picked up on the sixth ring. "Dad, there you are!" Caitlin's voice practically sparkled with artificial enthusiasm. "I was starting to worry when you didn't answer earlier." "Sorry, sweetheart. I was out running some errands." I kept my tone warm, grandfatherly. "How's Phoenix treating you?" "Oh, you know how these business conferences are. But listen, I have the most wonderful news." She paused for dramatic effect. "Jeremy and I have been planning something very special for you." I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles going white. "Oh?" "We want to treat you to a vacation. You deserve some rest and relaxation after everything you've been through since Mom died." Her voice carried that practiced sympathy I now recognized as manipulation. "There's this beautiful place we found. It's like a resort, but with medical staff on hand, just in case you need anything." A resort with medical staff. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. "That sounds lovely, sweetheart. You really didn't need to go to such trouble for me." "Nonsense. Your family." Jeremy's voice came through the background. He must have been listening on speakerphone. "We've already made all the arrangements." "When were you thinking?" I managed, knowing full well they wanted me gone before they returned to claim their inheritance. "Well, we should be back by next Friday," Caitlin said. "We were hoping you could be ready by then. Just pack some clothes and personal items. You know, the essentials." The essentials. Not the photo albums Ellen had lovingly arranged. Not the furniture I'd built with my own hands. Just the essentials for an old man being shuffled off to die. "Actually, Caitlin, I have a surprise for you too when you get back." "Oh, Dad, what kind of surprise?" She sounded genuinely pleased, probably imagining I'd signed papers or made their job easier somehow. I walked to the bay window I'd built for Ellen, looking out at the garden she'd planted, the porch swing where we'd spent countless evenings planning our future. "It's something I've been working on since our last conversation. I think you'll be very surprised." "You're so sweet, Dad. We'll talk about everything when we get home, okay? Get some rest, and we'll take care of everything else." Sweet. She called me sweet while planning to steal my life. "I will, sweetheart. I love you." "Love you too, Dad. See you Friday." The line went dead, and I set the phone down with hands steadier than they'd been in weeks. I walked to my home office and opened my laptop, the screen glowing to life with possibilities I'd never considered before. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for just a moment before I typed, "Real estate agents, Denver." The search results filled my screen like ammunition in a war I was finally ready to fight. I'd always been methodical. 25 years as a construction engineer had taught me to research thoroughly before making any decision. Tonight, that methodical nature would serve a different purpose. I clicked through agent profiles, comparing success rates and client testimonials, like I used to compare structural steel suppliers. Cherry Hills, Highlands Ranch, University Hills, neighborhoods where houses sold for the kind of money Caitlin and Jeremy were already spending in their dreams. One name kept appearing in the top results: Brian Connor, 43 years old, specialized in quick sales, averaged 18 days from listing to closing. His photo showed a professional smile and confident eyes, the kind of man who could make things happen fast. His testimonials were exactly what I needed to see. Brian sold our house in 6 days. Cash buyer lined up within 48 hours. Smooth closing, no complications. I stared at his direct phone number, prominently displayed beneath his credentials. This was it, the moment that would set everything in motion. Once I made this call, there would be no going back to being the grateful, manageable old man my daughter expected. Ellen's photo on my desk seemed to be watching me. I could almost hear her voice. "Roy, are you sure about this?" I was sure. More sure than I'd been about anything since her funeral. I dialed Brian Connor's number with steady fingers. "Brian Connor, Connor Real Estate. How can I help you?" "Mr. Connor, my name is Roy Hayes. I'm interested in selling my house quickly. How fast can these things actually happen?" "Well, Mr. Hayes, that depends on several factors. But with the right property and pricing strategy, I've closed deals in as little as 10 days with cash buyers. What kind of timeline are you looking at?" 10 days. My heart hammered against my ribs. 10 days? That fast? Absolutely. Denver's market is incredibly hot right now, especially for well-maintained properties in established neighborhoods. Can you tell me a bit about your house? I looked around my kitchen, seeing it through a buyer's eyes for the first time. Two-story, 3,400 square feet, built in 1999, Cherry Creek area, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. I've maintained it well, did most of the work myself over the years. Brian's voice sharpened with interest. That sounds exactly like what several of my investors are looking for. Original owner, well-maintained, established neighborhood. Those are premium selling points. Would you be interested in a property assessment? How quickly could you come by? I can be there this afternoon if you're available. Say 3 o'clock? I glanced at the clock. It was just past noon. 3 o'clock works perfectly. Let me give you the address. After I hung up, I sat in the sudden quiet of my kitchen, the magnitude of what I'd set in motion beginning to settle in my chest. In 3 hours, a stranger would walk through the house Ellen and I had built together, assigning dollar values to our memories. I spent the next 2 hours cleaning obsessively, old habits from Ellen's time when she'd insist the house be spotless for any visitor. I dusted the bay window, straightened the throw pillows on the couch, made sure every surface gleamed. But this cleaning felt different. I wasn't preparing for guests. I was preparing for an execution. At exactly 3 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I smoothed my shirt, took a deep breath that carried the scent of Ellen's lavender sachets, still tucked in the linen closet, and walked toward the front door. My hand trembled slightly as it closed around the brass doorknob I'd installed myself 15 years ago. Beyond this door waited either my salvation or my damnation. I turned the handle and opened the door to my future. Brian Connor looked exactly like his photo, professional but approachable, early 40s, with the kind of confident bearing that came from years of successful deals. He carried a leather portfolio and tablet, and the moment he stepped inside, his eyes went wide. Wow! He stopped in my entryway, his gaze traveling up the crown molding I'd installed by hand to the hardwood floors Ellen and I had selected together. Mr. Hayes, this is exactly what I was hoping for. I watched him take in the details, the way the afternoon light streamed through Ellen's bay window, the seamless flow from living room to dining room that I'd achieved by removing a load-bearing wall and installing a beam. His appreciation was genuine, professional. You weren't kidding about maintaining this place. He pulled out his tablet and started taking photos. These hardwood floors throughout, original? Installed them myself in 2001. Ellen wanted something that would last, so we went with 3/4-inch solid oak. I found myself falling into the familiar rhythm of discussing my work, proud despite everything that was happening. And this kitchen... Brian stopped at the granite countertop, running his hand along the edge. Custom installation? Every inch. Ellen picked the pattern, said the gold veining reminded her of sunlight. My voice caught slightly. I spent 3 weekends getting the measurements perfect. Brian was typing notes on his tablet, photographing the custom cabinets, testing faucets and outlets with the thoroughness of someone who knew what buyers wanted. Mr. Hayes, I have to be honest with you. In my 15 years doing this, I rarely see properties maintained to this standard. I'm an engineer, was an engineer. I believe in building things right the first time. It shows. He gestured toward the living room. May I? I nodded, following him as he admired the open floor plan, the built-in bookcases flanking the fireplace, the way Ellen's decorating choices had turned our construction project into a home. This bay window, custom work. Built it for my wife. She wanted a reading nook. I could picture her there with her mystery novels and afternoon tea, her reading glasses perched on her nose. Brian was taking measurements now, his excitement barely contained. Mr. Hayes, I need to show you some comparable sales. He pulled up listings on his tablet. Similar properties in this area have been selling for $850,000 to $920,000. My chest tightened. That was more than Caitlin and Jeremy had estimated in their cruel conversation. But given the condition and custom features of your home, I'm thinking we price it at $890,000. That should move it quickly while getting you top dollar. $890,000. I sat down heavily in Ellen's reading chair, the numbers spinning in my head. That much? I managed. Mr. Hayes, you're sitting on a gold mine. Properties like this don't come on the market often, especially not in this condition. Brian's voice carried the confidence of someone who knew his business. I actually have an investment group that's been looking for exactly this type of property. What kind of investment group? They specialize in high-quality rental properties in established neighborhoods. They pay cash. No financing contingencies. No repair negotiations. They can close in 10 business days. 10 business days. Caitlin and Jeremy would return from Phoenix in 8 days, expecting to find their grateful, manageable father ready to be shipped off to their resort. What's the catch? Why so fast? Brian smiled. No catch. Cash means no loan delays, no appraisal contingencies that could kill the deal. They do their own inspections, but frankly, your house is in better shape than most new construction I see. I looked around the living room where Caitlin had taken her first steps, where Ellen and I had hosted Christmas mornings and birthday parties and quiet Sunday afternoons, reading the paper together. When would I need to be out? Standard contract gives you 30 days after closing, but they're flexible if you need more time. The main thing is getting clear title and completing the paperwork. I thought about Caitlin's voice on the phone, calling me sweet while planning to steal my life. I thought about Jeremy's cold calculation, reducing me to a burden to be managed. I thought about Ellen's warning about being too generous, too trusting. Let's do it. Brian's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing genuine excitement. Excellent choice, Mr. Hayes. Let me call them right now. I watched him dial, heard him describe my property with the enthusiasm of someone who'd found buried treasure. Cherry Creek area, original owner, immaculate condition, custom features throughout. He ended the call with a broad smile. They want to move forward immediately. I can have the initial contracts ready by tomorrow morning. The sun was setting through Ellen's bay window, casting golden light across the room where I'd just agreed to sell 25 years of my life. But for the first time since that devastating phone call, I felt something that had been missing for too long. Control. How does 9 a.m. sound? The question hung in the air like smoke, and I realized Brian was waiting for an answer that would change everything. The grandfather clock in the hallway, Ellen's 15th anniversary gift to me, ticked steadily in the silence. 9 a.m. sounds perfect. After Brian left with promises of contracts and closing timelines, I stood alone in the house that would soon belong to someone else. The evening light through Ellen's windows painted everything golden, like a photograph of a life I was about to leave behind. But it wasn't sadness I felt, it was anticipation. Brian arrived the next morning with contracts, a notary, and coffee for everyone, the kind of professional efficiency I'd always respected. I read every line with the thoroughness that had made me a good engineer, checking details the way I used to check blueprints. Sale price, $800 to $90,000. Cash purchase. Closing date, 10 business days from signing. The notary, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, walked me through each signature. Minimal contingencies, just the title search and final walkthrough. And I can remain in the house for 30 days after closing if needed? That's correct, Mr. Hayes, though most sellers prefer to move out sooner rather than later, just for peace of mind. Peace of mind? I almost laughed. The only peace of mind I'd have would come from seeing Caitlin and Jeremy's faces when they discovered what their burden had done. I signed my name with steady hands, and just like that, the process was in motion. The first 3 days passed in a blur of paperwork and inspections. The title company began their search through decades of records. The investors sent their team, a polite crew who admired my workmanship and found nothing to complain about. Your father-in-law really knew what he was doing, one of them told the heir, since they assumed I was already gone. These floors, this electrical work, all top quality. Days 4 through 6, I became a man with a secret mission. I researched apartments online, looking for something small but comfortable, somewhere I could start over with nearly $900,000 in the bank. I found a place in Highlands, a senior community with golf courses and a community center, the kind of place Ellen and I had sometimes talked about for our golden years. I also called storage facilities, planning which of Ellen's things I'd keep and which I'd have to leave for the new owners. Her china, definitely. Her jewelry box, the photo albums, the essentials of a life lived together. Days 7 through 9 brought a strange confidence I hadn't felt in years. Each morning I woke up knowing I was one step closer to freedom, one step closer to showing my daughter that her confused old father was sharper than she'd ever imagined. Mrs. Patterson from next door noticed the activity, asked about the inspectors and official-looking people. Just some work being done, I told her, hating the half-truth, but knowing the full truth would spread through the neighborhood before I was ready. On day 8, Brian called with final confirmation. Everything's on track for tomorrow's closing, Mr. Hayes. The buyers are thrilled with the inspection results. Wire transfer will be completed the same day. You'll have access to funds immediately. That night, I packed a single suitcase with clothes and personal items, not because I was moving yet, but because I wanted to be ready for anything. I looked at Ellen's photo on our dresser and whispered, I hope you understand what I'm doing. Friday morning arrived bright and clear, the kind of spring day Ellen used to say was Denver at its finest. I dressed carefully in my best suit, not the funeral suit, but the navy one Ellen had bought me for Caitlin's college graduation. The title company office was all professional efficiency and congratulations. The buyers were represented by their attorney, a sharp woman who double-checked every document. Brian handled the paperwork like a conductor leading an orchestra. Mr. Hayes, if you'll sign here, and here, an initial there. Each signature felt like cutting a chain. The deed transfer, the settlement statement, the final acknowledgement that 1247 Maple Street no longer belonged to Roy Hayes. And this is your wire transfer confirmation. $890,000, less closing costs, has been deposited to your account. I stared at the numbers on the paper. More money than I'd ever seen in one place. More money than Caitlin and Jeremy had dreamed their burden could access. We shook hands all around, everyone pleased with the smooth transaction. Brian walked me to my truck, promising to stay in touch if I ever needed real estate services again. You made the right choice, Mr. Hayes. Sometimes a fresh start is exactly what we need. I drove home through neighborhoods I'd known for 25 years, past the elementary school where Caitlin had learned to read, past the park where Ellen and I used to walk every Sunday morning. But instead of nostalgia, I felt liberation. I pulled into my driveway and sat in my truck, looking at the house that was no longer mine. The keys to the front door felt heavy in my palm, but tomorrow I'd hand them over to the new owners and walk away from this chapter of my life. Caitlin and Jeremy were due back from Phoenix in 3 days. They'd arrive expecting to find their grateful, manageable father ready to be packed off to their resort. Instead, they were going to find an empty house and a lesson they'd never forget. I climbed out of my truck and walked toward my front door, reaching for my phone to make the next call in a plan that was working better than I'd ever hoped. The engine ticked as it cooled in my driveway, but I couldn't bring myself to turn it off. I sat staring at the house I'd built with my own hands, the house that now belonged to strangers, the house where Caitlin and Jeremy expected to return and find their grateful, manageable father waiting to be shipped off. The keys to the front door felt like lead in my palm. New owners or not, I still had access for 30 days, time enough to complete what I'd started. I drove to the Starbucks on Colfax Avenue and parked in the lot, hands steady as I dialed directory assistance for a 24-hour locksmith. The urgency fee would cost an extra $200, but money was no longer a concern. AAA Emergency Locksmith, this is Eddie speaking. I need all my door locks changed today. It's urgent. What kind of time frame are we looking at, sir? As soon as possible. I can pay cash. I can be there in 2 hours. Address? Back at the house, I waited for Eddie in my truck, watching Mrs. Patterson water her garden next door. She waved and I waved back, my chest tight with the knowledge that I was lying to everyone who cared about me. Eddie arrived in a van full of tools and hardware, a man in his 50s who'd clearly seen every kind of lock emergency Denver had to offer. Security issue, sir? He asked, studying my front door. New ownership situation. Better safe than sorry. He nodded like he'd heard it before and got to work. I watched him remove the locks I'd installed 15 years ago, the brass hardware Ellen had picked out because it matched our door knocker. These are quality locks, Eddie commented as he worked. Somebody knew what they were doing when they installed them. That was me. I like things done right. The new locks were silver instead of brass, modern instead of traditional. They clicked differently when Eddie tested them, a sharper, more mechanical sound than the old ones. Here are your new keys, sir. 3 copies of each, front door, back door, and garage side entrance. Eddie handed me a ring of keys that felt foreign in my palm. That'll be $450 with the emergency fee. I paid in cash from my wallet, knowing there would be no paper trail connecting Roy Hayes to this transaction. After Eddie left, I stood in my empty house and began the hardest part, packing 25 years of life into what I could carry. Ellen's jewelry box went into my suitcase first, along with our wedding photos and the novel she'd been reading when she died, bookmarks still marking page 247. My engineering certificates, our important documents, Ellen's favorite cookbook with the handwritten notes in the margins. I left almost everything else. The furniture that told our story would have to stay. The photo albums chronicling Caitlin's childhood. Ellen's clothes, still hanging in our closet, still carrying the faint scent of her perfume. While I packed, I called Sunset Manor Apartments on my phone, explaining that I needed a furnished one-bedroom immediately. "We have a lovely unit available for immediate occupancy," said Mrs. Chen, the property manager. "Month-to-month lease if you prefer flexibility." "I'll take it." I met Mrs. Chen at the apartment complex an hour later, a modest but clean building designed for seniors, with a community center and well-maintained grounds. The one-bedroom unit was simple but comfortable, furnished with everything I needed to start over. "Cash deposit is perfectly fine, Mr. Hayes. When would you like to move in?" "Tonight." Mrs. Chen's eyebrows rose slightly, but she didn't ask questions. I signed the lease and handed over first month's rent plus deposit, nearly $3,000 that would have seemed impossible to spend casually just 2 weeks ago. Loading my car in the gathering dusk, I caught Mrs. Patterson watching from her window. She waved again, and I felt the weight of all the relationships I was severing, all the connections Caitlin and Jeremy had forced me to cut. I took one last walk through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing differently now that the house belonged to someone else. In the kitchen, where Ellen had taught Caitlin to bake Christmas cookies. In the living room, where we'd watched Caitlin open presents on Christmas morning. In our bedroom, where Ellen had taken her last breath while I held her hand. "I'm sorry, honey," I said aloud to Ellen's memory. "But you'd understand. You always said I was too generous for my own good." I locked the new locks and drove away from Maple Street for what might be the last time, my rear-view mirror full of the life I was leaving behind. The sun was setting when I arrived at Sunset Manor, my car loaded with the essentials of my existence. I carried my suitcase to my new front door, fumbling with unfamiliar keys to unfamiliar locks. Inside the small apartment, I dropped my suitcase and immediately reached for my phone. The final phase of my plan required one more call, one more piece of the puzzle that would give Caitlin and Jeremy the surprise of their lives. The apartment felt like a motel room, functional but soulless, with generic furniture and the lingering smell of industrial carpet cleaner. I stood holding my phone, Ellen's photo already positioned on the nightstand, trying to decide which bank would best protect nearly $900,000 from the children who thought they deserved it. I opened my laptop on the small dining table and began researching banks that specialized in large deposits. Colorado Community Bank caught my attention, smaller than the major chains with a focus on personal service and discretion, exactly what I needed. "Colorado Community Bank, Private Banking Division. This is David Morrison." "Mr. Morrison, my name is Roy Hayes. I need to open an account for a substantial deposit, around $890,000. The brief pause on the other end told me David was recalculating his day. "We'd be absolutely delighted to work with you, Mr. Hayes. When would be convenient for a consultation?" "Monday morning, 9 a.m.? "Perfect. I'll have everything prepared." The weekend stretched ahead of me like uncharted territory. I'd never lived anywhere but the house Ellen and I built together. This tiny apartment felt like exile. But it was exile by choice. My choice, not theirs. Saturday morning, I made coffee in the unfamiliar kitchenette and methodically unpacked my belongings. Ellen's jewelry box on the dresser, my engineering awards on the bookshelf, our wedding photo beside the bed where I'd sleep alone in a space that had never known Ellen's presence. I drove to the grocery store and bought food for one person. Simple meals, nothing that required the kind of cooking Ellen had loved. The checkout clerk, a young man with kind eyes, asked if I was new to the area. "Just moved in," I told him, "starting fresh." Sunday morning, I discovered a coffee shop called Brews and Views, 3 blocks from my apartment. The barista, A young woman named Sarah, with purple streaks in her hair, made the kind of strong coffee I preferred. "You're new around here," she observed, not prying, just friendly. "Retired engineer," I said, "looking for a quieter life." "Well, you've found the right neighborhood for that. Most of our customers are pretty mellow." I sat by the window with my coffee, watching people walk dogs and push strollers, living the kind of normal Saturday morning that Ellen and I used to treasure. But instead of sadness, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: anticipation. Monday morning, I dressed in my best suit and drove to Colorado Community Bank. David Morrison was younger than I'd expected, maybe 45, with the kind of professional warmth that came from handling people's life savings. "Mr. Hayes, what brings you to Colorado Community Bank?" "I recently sold my house. I need a fresh start with an institution that values personal relationships over transaction fees." David nodded with genuine understanding. "We specialize in exactly that kind of service. Tell me about your needs." I explained my situation carefully. A widower who'd sold his family home and needed secure, accessible banking. David asked thoughtful questions, never prying beyond what was necessary for account setup. "I'll need to wire the funds from my previous bank," I explained. "No problem at all. We can initiate that transfer today, and the funds should clear by Wednesday." David prepared the paperwork with quiet efficiency. Online banking, debit card, and checkbook, all standard services. Given the amount, I'd also recommend our premium account package for additional security features. I signed documents that made me an official client of Colorado Community Bank, customer number 847293, with access to nearly $900,000 that Caitlin and Jeremy would never see. Tuesday and Wednesday passed in the strange rhythm of my new routine. Morning coffee at Brews and Views. Sarah remembered my order and asked about my weekend. Afternoon walks through the neighborhood, discovering a small park with benches where other retirees fed pigeons and read newspapers. Wednesday afternoon, David called with the news I'd been waiting for. "Mr. Hayes, your funds have cleared successfully. Your account is fully active." I hung up and looked around my small apartment, at Ellen's photo watching me from the nightstand, at the simple life I was building from the wreckage of my daughter's betrayal. For the first time since Ellen's death, I felt truly in control of my own destiny. Wednesday evening, I sat in my single chair. Not Ellen's reading chair, not the recliner where I'd heard Caitlin's betrayal. Just a plain chair in a plain room that belonged entirely to me. I opened my laptop and typed "mini surveillance cameras" into the search bar. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, knowing that what I was about to order would capture the final act of my revenge. Caitlin and Jeremy were returning on Friday, expecting to find their grateful old father ready to be managed. Instead, they were going to discover that their burden had become their biggest problem. The search results filled my screen with dozens of surveillance options, from obvious security cameras to devices disguised as everyday objects. After 30 minutes of research, I found what I needed: a wireless mini camera hidden inside what looked like a phone charger. The specifications were perfect for my engineering mind: Wi-Fi enabled with smartphone app control, motion-activated recording, 12-hour battery life, and crystal clear video quality. Most importantly, it could stream live footage directly to my phone from anywhere with internet access. I ordered it with expedited shipping, paying the extra $40 to guarantee Thursday delivery. The total cost was $149, an amount that would have made me hesitate 2 weeks ago, but barely registered now. With the camera ordered, I turned to the next crucial element: the note that would explain everything to Caitlin and Jeremy when they discovered their keys no longer worked. The first draft was too angry, too raw with the pain of their betrayal. The second was too cold, missing the personal devastation they'd caused. By the third draft, I found the right tone: dignified but devastating, loving but final. I wrote in my careful engineer's handwriting, the penmanship Ellen had always admired: "Dear Caitlin and Jeremy, if you're reading this, it means my plan worked perfectly. I heard your phone conversation about putting me in a nursing home because I'm becoming a burden. I heard you calculating how much money you'd make selling my house. The house has been sold for $890,000 cash. The money is safely in my new bank account, where it will stay. I've moved to a place where I'm appreciated, not tolerated. Don't worry about me. worry about your own housing situation. Your belongings have been packed and are being stored at Denver Moving and Storage on Colfax Avenue. You have 30 days to claim them before storage fees begin. I gave you everything I had for 42 years. You repaid me by planning to warehouse me so you could steal my life's work. I hope the lesson was worth the cost. Love, Dad. Thursday morning, the FedEx truck arrived at my apartment with a small box containing my surveillance equipment. I spent an hour in my kitchen testing the device and learning the smartphone app. The video quality was remarkably clear, the audio sharp enough to catch whispered conversations. Thursday afternoon, I drove to my former house for the last time. I used the garage door opener I'd never given Caitlin and Jeremy, parking inside to avoid questions from neighbors. My hands shook slightly as I approached the front door with my new keys. Inside, the house still smelled like home. Ellen's lavender sachets, the lemon oil I used on the wooden furniture, the faint residue of 25 years of family dinners. But there were new additions that made my chest tight. Caitlin and Jeremy's suitcases by the stairs, their mail scattered on the kitchen counter, evidence that they'd been treating my house as their personal storage facility while planning my exile. I positioned the camera charger by the front door outlet, angling it perfectly to capture anyone entering. The view through my phone app showed the entire entryway, including the spot where I planned to hang my note. I tested the motion detection, walking in and out of frame until I was satisfied the system would capture every moment of their return. Then I taped the envelope to the inside of the front door at eye level, where they couldn't possibly miss it. Standing in my living room one final time, I touched the mantel where Ellen's photo had sat for 23 years. The new owners would put their own family photos there, create their own memories in the rooms Ellen and I had filled with love. "It's done, sweetheart," I whispered to Ellen's memory. "Justice served." I locked the house with my new key, tested the camera feed one more time from my car, and drove back to my apartment. The motion detector was armed, the battery fully charged, and my phone ready to alert me the moment Caitlin and Jeremy discovered their keys no longer worked. Back in my apartment, I sat in my chair with my phone in my hand, watching the empty doorway through the camera app. The timestamp showed 6:30 p.m. Thursday evening. Tomorrow, Caitlin and Jeremy would return from their business trip, probably discussing their nursing home plans and already spending my money in their minds. They had no idea their grateful old father had become their worst nightmare. I woke Friday morning with the anticipation of a man about to witness justice after years of injustice. My coffee tasted better than it had in weeks, and even the small apartment felt less confining as I settled into my chair with my phone, the camera feed showing my empty former doorway. 4:30 p.m. They should arrive soon. I'd memorized their travel patterns. Caitlin always insisted on leaving Phoenix by noon to avoid traffic, and Jeremy drove exactly the speed limit. They'd be pulling into my driveway within the hour. I looked at Ellen's photo on my nightstand. "I hope you understand what I'm doing, honey." They left me no choice. 5:15 p.m. My phone buzzed with motion detection. A black SUV, Jeremy's car, pulled into the driveway of my former house. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched the screen. Caitlin stepped out first, stretching after the long drive. Jeremy emerged from the driver's side, pulling their suitcases from the back. They moved with the casual confidence of people coming home to claim their inheritance. I watched them approach the front door, Caitlin fishing her keys from her purse, while Jeremy set the luggage down. She inserted her key into the lock I'd had changed just yesterday. The key didn't turn. Caitlin frowned, examining her keyring. She tried again, jiggling the key with growing frustration. "That's weird," her voice came through my phone's speaker. "My key's not working." Jeremy stepped closer, his expression shifting from tired to concerned. "Let me try the back door." I watched him disappear around the side of the house, while Caitlin continued struggling with the front lock. When Jeremy returned 3 minutes later, his face had darkened with alarm. "Back door's locked too, and the garage remote isn't working?" His voice carried the edge of panic I'd hoped to hear. "Caitlin, someone changed these locks." "What? That's impossible. Dad doesn't even know any locksmiths." Jeremy studied the front door more carefully, his financial advisor's mind recognizing trouble when he saw it. "These are brand new locks. This isn't an accident." Caitlin pulled out her phone with shaking fingers. "I'm calling Dad." I watched her dial my old landline, the number I'd had disconnected 3 days ago. After several rings, her face crumpled with confusion. No answer. It's not even going to voicemail. Try his cell phone. He doesn't have a cell phone, remember? We talked about getting him one for emergencies. Her voice cracked with the first hint of real fear. Jeremy was examining the windows now, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. There, that one's unlocked. I can boost you up. I watched my daughter climb through the kitchen window I deliberately left unlatched, her business suit catching on the frame. She disappeared inside, and moments later the front door opened from within. Jeremy entered with their suitcases, and both of them stopped dead when they saw the white envelope taped to the door at eye level. Caitlin's hand trembled as she pulled down the envelope with her name and Jeremy's written in my careful script. I leaned forward in my apartment chair, phone clutched in both hands, as she tore open the seal. Her eyes moved across my words, Jeremy reading over her shoulder. I watched their faces change, confusion to shock, to disbelief, to horror. He sold the house? Caitlin's voice rose to a near shriek. How could he do this to us? Jeremy snatched the note from her hands, reading it again as if the words might change. That manipulative old bastard. He was playing us the whole time. $890,000. Caitlin was crying now, her careful makeup streaking down her cheeks. He kept it all. That money was supposed to be our future. Your future, Jeremy snapped, his mask of devoted son-in-law finally slipping. This is your father, Caitlin. You should have handled this better. My fault? She whirled on him, years of suppressed resentment boiling over. You're the one who said he was becoming a burden? You're the one who pushed for the nursing home. Well, he was a burden. Look what he's done to us. Jeremy gestured wildly around the room that was no longer theirs. We're homeless. Our lease expires next week. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on me. They were fighting in my living room about being homeless, just as they'd planned to make me homeless in their nursing home. Call a lawyer, Caitlin said desperately. There has to be something we can do. He can't just sell the house without telling us. With what money? Jeremy's voice dripped with contempt. In case you forgot, I lost my job 6 months ago, and your marketing salary barely covers our car payments. Then get another job? Where? Do you think financial firms are lining up to hire advisors who got fired for questionable transactions? I watched my daughter's face crumble as she realized the full scope of their situation. No house, no inheritance, no savings, and Jeremy's unemployable status finally revealed. How could he be so cruel? She whispered. The same way you were cruel when you called him a burden and planned to warehouse him. Jeremy shot back. The old man was smarter than both of us. Through my phone screen, I watched them collapse into my old furniture that would be gone tomorrow when the new owners took possession. Caitlin buried her face in her hands, while Jeremy stared at my note, with the expression of a man who'd finally understood he'd been outplayed. I turned off the camera feed. I'd seen enough. Walking to my small kitchen, I opened the bottle of Ellen's favorite wine I'd saved from the house, a 2018 Bordeaux we'd been saving for a special occasion that never came. I poured myself a glass and raised it toward Ellen's photo. To you, my love, justice served. The wine tasted like victory. They learned what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, probably Caitlin trying to reach me through some new method. I deleted it without reading and powered off the phone completely. Walking to my window, I looked out at the Denver skyline painted gold by the setting sun. Somewhere across the city, my daughter and her husband were facing the consequences of their cruelty. Somewhere in my former house, they were learning that their burden had become their biggest problem. For the first time in 2 years, since Ellen's death, I felt completely free. I was no longer anyone's burden. I was my own man again, with my own money, my own choices, and my own future stretching ahead, like an open road. Roy Hayes had left the building, and he was never coming back. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.